You're watching the Edward Fowler Show. Now, here's your host, Ed.
Yes, there we go. We're now finally live here on youtube.com/Edward Fowler. I was live a few moments ago, but it was a private stream inadvertently, and now I can see the live chat as well. We are now officially live on the correct stream, so I apologise for that. So I will reintroduce myself again because obviously nobody even heard this or watched this, so let's just say this again. You can find the show on youtube.com right here, or on your favorite audio platforms, because this show can be listened on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Amazon Music, and of course iHeartRadio, or wherever else you may get your podcasts on. And tonight I'm joined by another brilliant guest out of Memphis, Tennessee, or he may not live there anymore, because I know you went to the Memphis University, and you may have graduated by now, because he is there till 2025, so he might have already finished and moved on with his life, but we'll find out in just a moment. This person also is a broadcaster, a reporter maybe, an interviewer, depending what, I guess, genre he's dipping his toes into. He's also maybe even a speaker as well. But please welcome to the show right now, live from a virtual studio somewhere in the world, Jake Brewer. Welcome to the show, officially now.
Absolutely. Thank you, Edward. First off, just want to thank you for having me on the show. I know you have a long list of very special guests throughout the history of the show, and so it's an honor and privilege to be on here and just sort of talk to you for a few minutes. I know you had mentioned earlier, you called me a broadcaster, a reporter, a speaker, but to be quite honest, I don't know what exactly I am quite yet either. But we'll talk more throughout this interview, but I do a little bit of everything kind of in the sports realm, sports entertainment realm. So just wanted to thank you for having me on.
No, thank you so much for accepting the invite. I know we only just got connected about 2 or 3 days ago, might even be shorter. I don't know, these days will go too quickly for me to keep up with, but it's thank you for you to, I guess, accepting to be here tonight unexpectedly, because of course it's the eve of that famous party which you guys like to do in America, July the 4th, where you'll have your very much victory against the UK. So I hope you'll enjoy that little party tomorrow night.
Of course, the 4th of July, it's obviously always a big deal. This year things are a little weird because a little bit of political unrest here in the U.S., but at the end of the day, it's still going to be a good time, and looking forward to what I have planned tomorrow night. So,
well, let's tell the viewers and
listeners
so, what you're doing tomorrow night.
Yeah, so earlier, kind of in your intro for this interview, you had asked me, or you had said you were not sure if I was still in the Memphis, Tennessee area, but I still am. I was born and raised in this area, went to the University of Memphis here, and still am in the area. So tomorrow night, we have a professional baseball team called the Memphis Redbirds. They're the AAA affiliate of the St. Louis Cardinals. And so we have our 4th of July celebration themed baseball game tomorrow night. And I was given the opportunity to host/MC this special event. So, if you're from the Memphis area, if there's anybody here watching or anybody from the U.S., we all know baseball is a huge deal in America. And tomorrow is easily the biggest home game of the year for the Redbirds.
2 points to raise from that. One is you're also an MC, which I forgot to mention in my introduction, so we can also add that to your list of many different, I guess, skills you have, because you got many different skills, and it's great to see you putting them to good use. Second thing is, yes, we know baseball is, I guess, America's favorite, I guess, pastime, but it's also over here now as well, we got our own leagues, and of course, Major League Baseball comes over for the London series in the August area, I believe, at the West Ham, or former West Ham Stadium, as well. So it's good to see baseball, spring its rings now worldwide, and maybe the world, I guess the World Series will actually become a World Series and actually play outside America at some point, because I think that makes it more dominant that it's a World Series, because at the moment it's got a World Series, but it's just played in America.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, baseball is kind of a growing game. It's becoming a global game. There are, uh, events. There's a specific event called the World Baseball Classic that's played all over the world. Different, nations being represented in that, and so obviously baseball starting in America, but it has certainly become a global game here in today's day and age. And fun fact, so my older brother, he is a professional umpire. He's in the minor leagues, the Double A affiliation, and so he's traveling, all over the country. He's done that. When you're an umpire, you're on the road April to September, and so he's really working hard with that and just trying to make his mark to eventually, hopefully, become a major league umpire himself.
Oh, right.
So
Well, I will keep a lookout for him appearing on Major League Baseball or even on UK TVs at some point hopefully in the future, because I'm sure I can then criticize if I need to
of
on social
course,
media.
of course,
uh,
I mean, we all know umpires cannot. They need glasses. They can't see.
yeah, yeah,
They don't know
yeah,
what they're doing. But
yeah.
no, but realistically, though, my brother for sure. I'm super proud of
Of
him, and
course.
everything he's done, and all the other umpires. You really gain a certain respect for officiating of all sports once you kind of see the grind of a minor league umpire.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely for sure. And it's interesting that you've not gone down the same route as your brother. You know, you've seen how successful he's having in that particular, I guess, sport. And
Mhm.
did that ever cross your mind to do that, to follow that
Yeah,
footsteps?
no, so it certainly has crossed my mind. And last year I actually had the opportunity to kind of go down that same route, but I had, eventually decided, maybe, I would love to have that occupation, but maybe I have other, aspirations in life, because as I do some emceeing, broadcasting work, and I kind of like to stay in that realm of the sports world rather than, being booed by fans and, you know, trash talked by coaches, players every single night. So,
Fair enough, fair enough. Well, it's similar to the, I guess, the officials in the, I guess you will call it soccer, but we call it football, real
of
football. You know,
course,
in the grassroots level, you know, they get a lot of abuse by the parents most of the
of
time,
course.
who are on
Yep,
the sidelines cheering on their son or daughter, and you know, with the different coaches as well screaming, as you mentioned in baseball as well, and even in NFL, I'm sure it happens as well. But yes, you do have a good voice for broadcasting for sure, and I know that off air we were discussing briefly about what you maybe do, because you know there's many people who get a foot in the door and then they become, you know, transition into different things. But with you, you want to stick with it, and I think that's good because I think you've got a real skill, and if you keep at it, I'm sure you'll be very famous and be popping on TV not just in America but around the world.
yeah. I mean, I certainly appreciate that. Obviously, those are very, high. That's a very high expectation. Who knows if I'll, make it to the big time or not. But certainly just, really just enjoying myself and everything that I'm doing right now. And if it leads to something bigger, I'm here. I'm here for the ride.
Yeah,
Absolutely.
yeah, absolutely, because you should be, and you know, it's not just high expectations. You know, it's there's a compliment. It's just a, you know, a rub on your shoulder to say that you just keep at it, and I'm sure someone with, I guess, more money will come knocking and be like, "Yep, this guy is correct. This guy knows what he's talking about." Yes, but I mean, was there somebody who inspired you to go down this route, or did this opportunity just came at your feet, or did you think, you know what? The more I talk, the more I think, yeah, I sound like them on TV or whatever it might be. So I want to follow in their footsteps.
Yeah, so I mean, I would say I have several sort of inspirations in my life. You know, basically my journey started, when I was in at the university in Memphis, and I started off, working in marketing and game day presentation for all of our University of Memphis sporting events. And working in a lot of those events, that you're in front of a crowd, right? And it's all about customer service and making sure you have a certain professional look about you. And that's kind of where the thought rolled in my head of, hey, I kind of like being in front of a crowd. I like entertaining. I enjoy, just making people happen to my MC slash hosting experience with the Memphis Redbirds organization. And, obviously, being a host or an MC of some sort, you have a microphone in front of your hand, you're in front of a camera. And so you just kind of have to, it's a show, right? And you have to entertain and making sure that you're doing everything that you need to do for that specific game or promotion. And so, to answer your question, I know that was
Yeah.
kind of a very long-winded intro. My main inspiration, kind of in the sports entertainment world, is a local guy here in Memphis by the name of Dustin Starr. And so Dustin Starr, he is the owner slash operator of Memphis Wrestling, where you can tune in on YouTube every Saturday at 11 a.m. Central Standard Time. Um, but yeah, Dustin Starr, he is a huge personality here in Memphis. And maybe, one day you can get connected with him and, you can interview him as well, just to kind of learn more about what he does. But I'd say he's certainly the guy that, I've certainly looked up to. And yeah, that's pretty much all I got.
Yeah, because he's a broadcaster as well, but he's a wrestler on the side. So, I mean, is that not something you want to do in the future?
Well, when it comes to wrestling, I'm still on the fence on if I ever want to train and actually get in the ring. But I know, when I go to our promo class
Yeah.
trainings every Wednesday, they kind of mess with me from time to time. They're like, Jake, you need to get in the ring, you need to train, you need to, do this and that. But still have not been talked into that quite yet. But you never know what'll happen down the line.
Yeah. Well, I think again, you're the new interviewer for Memphis Wrestling, and we'll get into that in a moment. But I just want to put this point out. The reason I guess you were brought in is because you're the best at what they're looking for. So I mean, why risk having to replace you with somebody else? When they can
Hmm.
just mature you, and you can build on that skill of yours to get even better and be one of the best interviewers in the game, and take it from there.
Right. Yeah, no, absolutely. And just to kind of piggyback off that, interviewing off camera, I'd say is certainly different than interviewing on camera, right? I mean, whenever you are working a, live or a wrestling event, when you have a camera in front of your face, it's not necessarily more, it's not about your voice, it's about your facial expressions and your reactions and your selling to what the person is that you're interviewing to. And so, yeah, I mean, I'm not really sure if I'm, kind of answering what you're saying, but I'm definitely appreciative of the fact that Memphis Wrestling, took the opportunity to bring me on. I'm still very new to the wrestling industry, but certainly want to grow and improve my on-camera skills, improve my TV work, just improve everything to just make that product even better to watch in the future.
Exactly, exactly. So having your face on there, people will come and watch us to see you as well, because I'm sure there'll be people watching, for the wrestling action, obviously, and for all the storylines. But there'll be certain people wanting to see you, because there'll be now people having a crush on you. I'm sure. From the outside world, because that's what happens, isn't it? So you be getting loads of new fans as well from admirers, not just in the local area, but also on YouTube. And you never know where that audience may be from. So
Right.
so you might be getting lots of love letters or letters saying, don't hurt him or stuff like that. So or saying like give him more airtime.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, it's absolutely hilarious. You talk about how the audience on YouTube, you never know where they're from, and
Yeah,
you're a prime example of this. I mean, you're from Manchester, United Kingdom, and you just happen to see me on the show, and you reached out, and so I mean, it's very very kind of scary almost of how vast the audience can be for something like YouTube, and just it's just crazy to think our promotion that's based in Memphis, Tennessee, obviously now has kind of a almost a worldwide audience in a way, because of where we're at, and just it's great to have that avenue, that platform to really showcase what Memphis wrestling is all about.
yeah. And there's another point as well, just to say, you mentioned in your book about Dustin earlier. I've actually had on, I guess, the spin off because I have the OG on the show, David Marquez. If I pronounce his second name, apologies if I've not mispronounced it correctly, but he is, I guess, the founder of Championship Wrestling from Hollywood, You know what I mean?
Yes.
I mean,
Hmm.
and I guess he was able to, I guess, either license the name for Justin to use. I'm not sure what the background is, but I do know that David was at one point, or maybe still is, still involved with the production side and sometime appearing on screen as an interviewer to advance some of the storylines for Memphis Wrestling. So I know those two are very good friends, as what I understand. And hopefully, you still are good friends. But you never
Hmm.
know in this wacky world of pro wrestling, do you? But last time I spoke to David, he was very good, and it was an honour to have him on the show. But just to show that out there, just to who might be new to this channel. But yeah, so David, great guy, and he's got many hats as well. So it's good to see that Dustin is able to carry on the brand which he started in California, now in Memphis as well, as like a
Yeah,
spin-off.
correct. And you say how David wears a lot of hats, and Dustin's the same exact way. I mean, he works his butt off to making sure everything is where it needs to be in line on the show. And he's a great sort of director and mentor, and I'm very appreciative of him of just sort of taking the chance on me to bring me on the show. And obviously being on Memphis Wrestling, being featured on the show, you never know what opportunity could come after that. So
Well,
very very
hopefully,
very grateful.
hopefully you get to replace him on commentary,
Yeah, hopefully so.
because
So
I think you can
Mhm.
do a better job than Justin.
Oh, I'm not sure about that. Dustin's fantastic at what he
Oh,
does, and
he is, but
yeah,
it's time for the next generation to take over. Is what I
yeah. I
think.
mean,
You're
you
young, you're
never know. I mean,
fresh.
maybe right. I mean, here in a few, maybe give it a year or two. Maybe he'll bring me on to be his color commentary guy. Who knows? But
No, no, no,
uh,
not the colour, the main guy.
right,
Dustin can
yeah,
go to the side because he's, he might start to misstep things, and not be as, fast paced with the action in the ring while you come along and you'll be well up to the minute of what's going on in the ring.
sure, sure. I mean, obviously, there's still much more learning to do because let's face it. I feel like broadcasting professional wrestling is much different than broadcasting basketball or
Oh,
football or
of
baseball.
course it is,
Because
yes. But I think you could be the next Michael Cole of the indie scene, or
hey, that would be
or a Jim Ross or a Tony Savoni. You never know.
sure. I mean, you certainly never know what could happen, but obviously, like I said earlier, just here for the ride, and whatever comes my way, I'll certainly just cross that bridge as it comes.
Yeah, 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 yeah. Well, it's going to be great, And again, no disrespect to Dustin, I'm just having a bit of fun there, but I mean, he's doing a phenomenal job anyway. But I mean, it's see good because then you get more airtime, and people will love that. I'm sure. The more they see you on screen, and you had an interview recently on there. I can't remember who it was with, but you look quite scared. And you put a
Yes.
quote out saying that, well, can someone stop this guy? To
Yep.
which someone did respond to you by saying, "Well, you were stood right next to him. You should have done something about it." So, what do you say to those critics? Saying you could have stopped him, or do you think that you're too scared and think that he got beat up by him?
The only thing I can tell to any critics or haters out there is, I don't think they've ever been in a room with Psycho Simon
Yeah,
staring straight into their soul. Psycho Simon, he recently won the Memphis Heritage
he
Championship, which
did.
is the most prestigious prize in Memphis wrestling. And so things are a little on edge right now in the locker room. He's a very terrifying guy, and I'm surprised he hasn't had an incident with a fan or anything. Things are scary over here in Memphis for sure.
Yeah, yeah, Psycho Simon. That's why it's called Psycho. That's for definitely there. But I mean, tell us about your tactics then going into interviews. Because of course, some interviews I'm sure are much easier, happier to get into because the wrestler you're interviewing is in a very good mood sometimes. And
Mhm.
then when you've got guys like Psycho Simon or other bad guys, who don't really want to give you any airtime and want the limelight to themselves, how do you handle those?
Yeah, the one thing I'll say when the professional wrestling world is backstage interviews are very difficult to control because, like you said, you can have a, very happy person's in a good mood, type guy, and he'll come in and, you can ask your question and then he answers it and everything's good and happy. But then you have other situations when you have a Psycho Simon, you can't even get the question out because you're too terrified on screen, you're too terrified on camera. And so, in situations like those, you just have to let the interview run its course. This past Sunday, I had a interview where I just had to leave the camera because things just got too chaotic, and you just have to let the talent kind of vent and get everything off their chest themselves. So, professional wrestling world interviews are certainly difficult to control from time to time.
Do you have a person saying you got to wrap this? Have you got like I guess someone can you down saying you got to get all these words out or the question out within so many seconds or so, or are you
Yeah, yeah.
or do you
So
have
obviously,
a free reign with that?
right. So obviously, being on a televised show that, I believe the show is an hour long exactly on
Correct.
YouTube.
Yeah.
And so, we have very specific time parameters on where we, have to start. You have to start and complete the interview. And so a lot of our interviews are typically, 60 seconds to 90 seconds. So you got to be very, very quick because obviously being on TV, you're very handicapped to those time parameters per se. So
So if there is like let's say you won a bit over or maybe a bit less than what you need to, do you get time to I guess do a cut and take two type thing, or is it just a one shot one shoot type
yeah, yeah.
thing?
So I mean, obviously, we're talking off screen here. We're talking, non kayfabe. So just reeling back the curtain a little bit.
Wow, yeah, I
We
don't want. By the way, just for a disclaimer, I don't
of
want
course.
you to get into trouble with anybody at Memphis Wrestling. That's the last thing I want. This is not the show where I want to get you fired on. Okay, so
Oh no,
I
no,
don't want to get you
absolutely.
into trouble. I just want to put a
Right.
disclaimer out there that this is not what I'm trying to do. I'm just really am intrigued to know what actually goes on in
Yeah, yeah,
Memphis
of course.
without
So
me
yeah,
being
so
too much. Of
mhm.
course, without me being too much. Because of course I don't want to do that.
Right, of course, and I certainly appreciate you just throwing that out there. But no, I mean, so we have multiple takes. It typically takes 1 to 2 good takes to really get that final product. But I will say the emotion behind the interviews they're very real in that aspect. Because we've had people in the past lose championships and
Yeah,
they're legitimately upset about it, and
yeah,
so. It's really just all scenario based. No interview is the same.
no.
They're all a little bit different, and so that's one thing that I'm learning here in the professional wrestling world is you know obviously everybody's different and everybody's also different on different days, right? So I'm in a good mood now. I could be in a bad mood tomorrow, and so that's sort of how wrestling interviews work. Is none of them are exactly the same. They're all just a little bit unique in their own way.
Oh yeah, of course they are indeed. And you mentioned about how you could be in a bad mood one day, but you're not allowed to show that on TV because you're meant to be a much in betweener, unbiased as much as you can be.
Of
But I
course.
guess when you're doing basketball, baseball, whatever it might be, sports wise, and then going into the professional wrestling world and doing similar things, have you had many people say, "Oh, what made you to get into the professional wrestling world as an interviewer? Why not just
No,
stick to
certainly.
sports
I've
only?"
Absolutely. I've certainly had people ask me, why make that jump into professional wrestling? Because let's face it, you and I are wrestling fans, so we understand what wrestling is. But a lot of the people in the sports side of things that, have no business, have no interest in professional wrestling, they just see it as, just a fake, comedy show, which obviously you and I know it's so much more than that. And so, it's interesting because yes, professional wrestling is more of a show, but I feel as if in my role in particular, I still have to be that unbiased reporter. And so I still have to kind of bring that same, mentality of, hey, I can't show, bias towards our baby face, and I can't, be, an asshole or a dick to our heel. So, that's really what I'd say about that is, people who don't understand wrestling, they won't get it anyway. But let's face it. I mean, those people with those opinions or those thoughts, I mean, they're not that important in this situation.
Indeed. Thank you so much for the swear words because this service now is displayed on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, and wherever else you may listen to your podcast. So you made my life a lot easier. because I can never remember if the Shred was on the show or not. Because when I upload it over to my audio site, I can never remember, so I just keep it as
Right.
exhibit in case they have Shred, so that then I don't get into trouble by the platform. So thank
Of
you for making
course.
my
Of
life even
course.
easier on that. But again, this is a this is a unscripted show. I do not script this show. My guest does not know any questions I'm going to ask in advance at all. If you don't believe me, feel free to reach out to Jake, and I will give him the floor in just a moment to tell us where he can find you on social media, so that if you want to ask him on social media about, oh, is this show really unscripted? Yes, it is. But talk to me about, I guess, your interest then. Is there a particular sport you are interested in more, or are you happy to do any sport to cover as a broadcaster?
Yeah. So, my love for sports kind of supersedes what I do. I have some broadcasting experience, hosting experience, obviously, but I'd say my love for sports supersedes that. At the end of the day, I'm just a fan. And so, being here in America, we have, a lot of sports to choose from, a
We
lot to
do.
digest. Especially here in really just the Memphis area alone, we have an NBA team in the Memphis Grizzlies. We have, a minor league team in the Memphis Redbirds. We have a minor league professional football team in the Memphis Showboats. We have a minor league basketball team, the Memphis. So a lot to digest, a lot to digest. But when it comes to my interests and favorite sport or whatever, I wouldn't say my favoritism lies in a specific sport. I'd say my favoritism lies in a specific level of sports, and that is college athletics. I obviously just graduated from the University of Memphis. I, have worked within the University of Memphis athletic department for the last 4 years and counting. And so, what I love about college sports is, there's so much pageantry, there's so much meaning behind, um, you know, college athletics, and so. Um, just to kind of piggyback off that is college athletics is cyclical, right? Where in the NBA or the NFL, you have basketball, 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 or the NFL is football, football, football. College athletics, you have volleyball, soccer, football in the fall, and then you have basketball in the winter. Then you have baseball, softball in the spring, tennis in the spring, and so it's cyclical. And the fact that things don't get old, things don't
Yeah.
get they don't become stale in that aspect. So
Well, you mentioned about that. You mentioned about tennis. Of course, yesterday was, of course, Wimbledon. It's every day at the moment, and you might have saw a famous person at Wimbledon yesterday afternoon. John Cena, the 17-time world champion, was present behind the England football head coach Thomas Tuchel. It was very interesting because John Cena was with his lovely wife, having a good time in the hot sun, wearing a suit of all things. He must be sweating by the end of that, but it's interesting seeing John Cena making a UK trip to see Wimbledon. I bet you never know what. Maybe he was a fan of it. I don't know, but I don't think he's ever seen it before. Could be wrong. But I mean, what are you making of I guess the last time is now tour? With this whole 17 and no and whatever it is, and about how he is the greatest of all time, which he really is enjoying that, because I know when he was first being called that, he was not really, buying that. Of course, it's up to the fans to say who the greatest of all time is, but I mean, do you think he's the greatest of all time, or have you got somebody else who you think is more of a greatest of all time?
So, that question is very interesting because, when you say greatest of all time, you have to realize,
The GOAT.
what greatest all time of what? Are we talking professional wrestling? Are we talking WWE? Because when it comes to professional wrestling, no, I don't think he's the greatest of all time when it comes to that sport or the realm of professional wrestling.
Mm.
However, when you look at the history of WWE and the impact that he's made for the company, I 100% believe he is the greatest of all time, in that realm. But to answer your previous question of what do I feel on this, last final run, I kind of have mixed feelings about it because obviously love the heel turn. I love the way the heel turn happened. It was absolutely perfect. However, you know, I would have loved a little bit more of a follow up from The Rock and why John Cena specifically turned heel. Maybe there was a business a business transaction between Cena and The Rock backstage. Like there, I feel like there was a lot of story there that kind of went left unread, untold.
Well, what we understand is that The Rock came up with that whole soul business for one night just to sell tickets for Elimination Chamber in Canada because apparently they were not selling any tickets. So he came up with that whole was it situation, which was helpful John Cena to turn heel, and that's why we've not really seen anything else from that storyline because The Rock was a one-time thing. But it would have been nice to see it continue, or if there's an explanation. But I guess from the actions of John Cena that he did sold his soul to The Rock instead. Of course, we've not seen The Rock since Elimination Chamber. I could be wrong, but I don't remember seeing him since then. I know WrestleMania was meant to be in New Orleans next year. It's not too far from where you are, but I mean, are you now saddened that it's not nearer to where you are and actually going towards back to its home state of Las Vegas, Nevada for the second year in a row?
Yeah, no, I mean, I definitely think there is a factor of disappointment when it comes to that, announcement of moving it from New Orleans to Las Vegas. And so last time WrestleMania was in New Orleans, I had the pleasure of actually getting to go to that with my dad and my brother, which obviously phenomenal opportunity, phenomenal memory. But no, I mean, at the end of the day, I've had my opinion said of, I think Las Vegas could honestly be the permanent home of WrestleMania.
No, let's not do that.
Movement going on,
Let's
which I
not
know
do that.
obviously, the UK fans certainly do not want that at all. But that's just kind of a little opinion of mine. I don't see why, Las Vegas couldn't be the permanent home just because let's face it, one issue that I've had with the WWE over these last few years is years ago, WrestleMania was the only stadium show, right?
Yeah.
Which separated itself from all other shows throughout the year. But now we have multiple stadium shows throughout the year, and WrestleMania is 2 nights. And so I feel right now with the WWE calendar, WrestleMania doesn't really stick out as much as it used to. It's not as much of a unique show as
Mm.
it once was. And so my response to that, move it to Las Vegas permanently. That way, Las Vegas can be known as the home of WrestleMania. I don't. It's just a thought. Just a thought.
Well, SummerSlam is going to 2 nights as well from this year, as you
Mhm.
know, from New Jersey, back on the East Coast for SummerSlam. But I mean, you're right. There's too many stadium shows, as you point out. But that's because of TKO. I guess with Nick Khan and Triple H, they don't know what they're doing. Vince McMahon, on the other hand, did know what he was doing. He was the master behind all of that, and we've always seen him come back into the spotlight recently, trying to buy a bare knuckle fighting company, which
Mhm.
unfortunately he did not get. It would have been very much interesting to see what he would have done with that brand if he was able to get creative control from that. But maybe he should go into the BKB. Maybe go to the BKB, approach them to try and buy that. I would love that. I think that'd be great because, of course, I've had a lot of fighters on from the BKB, so I would love to see him owning that company. That'd be great. But
Of course.
nothing against the coin ownership, by the way. Or BKB, they did a phenomenal job with making bare knuckle fighting on the map. Not just in America, but over here in the UK, because BKP was a great promotion with BYB, which is the actual company,
Mhm.
bought them out, and then they decided to rebrand themselves to BKB. So it's now back on the map over here and of course in America. But they done a phenomenal job. But that would have been interesting, concept of Vince saying yep no to the other one with Conor McGregor, and actually trying to get his other hands on again in the bare knuckle world by maybe offering an offer to buy the BKB. But who knows what will happen with Vince McMahon? But obviously he's not done in the world of sports and entertainment, as you keep mentioning here. But he's got his own company now, an investment company out of, I believe, California. What do you make of that? Are you a fan of Vince McMahon, or do you think it's time for him just to leave and retire because of how much of maybe a disgrace he's left now of his legacy after all these allegations came out? But by the way, he's not being found guilty or not guilty yet, though, and so it's still out there.
Yeah, no, I mean, obviously Vince McMahon is a very, controversial figure in today's day and age. And, one thing that, I have to admit that is genius about Vince McMahon is, let's take the Montreal Screwjob, for example. Vince McMahon is a genius when it comes to taking a bad situation and flipping it into something that he can, you know, what's the word, he can be successful off of. Like, so, I talk about the Montreal screw job. Obviously, we all know what the Montreal screw job is. I don't have
Yes.
to explain that situation. But, because of that, Vince McMahon he was looked at as, not a good guy. Like, in real life, a lot of public backlash from that situation. And he took that backlash and made himself a TV heel
Yes.
just to kind of, engage or tap into that, feeling of, uh, disappointment or disgracefulness. I don't know what you want me to say, but my opinions on Vince McMahon, I think he's aging, and I think it's time for him to move on from the sports and entertainment industry. And I don't expect anything huge after this recent company that he just purchased or started or whatever it is that he did. So those are my 2 cents on that situation.
Interesting. Well, and I would say never because I did tell people when he retired back in 2022 that it was not the last of Vince McMahon and he will be back at some point, and it happened 6 months later with him, bringing himself back onto the board and, of course, selling to TKO or merging with it, what you want to call it, with the UFC. But of course, then he had to resign again from the company. But I mean, he's still got a few shares in there, and it's funny because I'm thinking maybe once this lawsuit is ended, whenever that does end, and if he is found, not guilty or whatever it might be, whatever the verdict will be, I think that this company, the TKO company, is just holding it on his behalf until he gets all this out of the way, and then he's going to buy it back, and then we'll see what happens then.
Yeah, I mean that is a very wild scenario that you just mentioned. I've not even thought of that before, but you never know. I mean, obviously, to me, I think that's a little out there, but it's the world of professional wrestling. Honestly, anything could happen. I would not be surprised if that situation came to fruition. But at the end of the day, like, I think WWE it's always going to be fine. I think they're always going to keep their main fans, and so I don't see a day where WWE ever necessarily goes out of business. At least not in my lifetime. And so
Well, I don't
um,
know about that because there's another point to point out is apparently they are the company that now owns WWE TKO. Apparently they're in debt, a lot of debt.
yeah,
So
that's
it
what I
could
hear.
possibly happen, and then the
Mhm.
savior Vincent Kennedy McMahon comes back and buys back the company.
That would be very, very I don't even have the words to describe just how wild that would be. And they could turn that into a TV storyline, similar to WCW back in 2001. I mean, Vince McMahon just showing up on an episode of Raw saying that he has bought back his company. Like,
Yeah,
that's television. That's
yeah.
storytelling in
Yeah,
itself.
yeah. Uh, by the way, in 2001, how old were you in 2001? Were you even
I
alive?
was I was not even born in
Oh
2001.
wow,
I was
right,
born
okay.
June 3rd in 2003. So, but luckily, I'm pretty knowledgeable about the
Of
history of
course,
the
of
company.
course, of
So,
course. Yes,
so I'm of
absolutely. But I
course.
just tell you, I was. Let's see, I was one and about maybe 1 and something months when that announcement was made. So of course I don't remember it at the time because I was only a baby. But I mean, I was alive when it was still called World Wrestling Federation.
Of
The
course.
Worlds Collide, and of course, I don't remember anything about WWF. I just remember. I do remember though. I will tell you, I do remember the commercial which came on the TV about getting the F out. I do
Yep.
remember that. But I was thinking, what on earth are they talking about? What's it? Well,
Right.
it's not about the F game. Get the F out. What do you mean by
Mhm.
that? Obviously, now years later, I now know what, of course, what that was all about was
Of
because
course.
they got sued by us in the UK. Can you believe that?
Hmm.
And they had to change their name, basically. So thanks to the UK courts, you're welcome. You have the World Wrestling Entertainment instead, because of us saying that. Oh yeah, we own the name, we own the rights to the World Wildlife Foundation. You can't have the same name as us or whatever it was about. But yeah, fun and games, I guess, for Vincent Kennedy and McMahon. Did you like the impression there of buying back? Because I don't know if you've seen the Jake Hager interview with Fowler up, but I did do a very good impression, I think, of Vince McMahon, to say, on that episode.
Yeah, no, I've not seen that impression, but I'm definitely interested now. May go back and
Well,
take a look at that
if you
impression.
go through my social media, there is a clip of it. So
Okay,
if
perfect.
you go on my Instagram or Facebook, you should see the clip of my impersonation, and I want to say impression of the Vince McMahon's "You're fired." I might even do it here tonight. You never know yet. The day is still young. Talk to me about where my viewers slash listeners can find you on social media. By the way.
Yeah. So I'm mainly active on Instagram and Facebook. Instagram, you can find me at jake.brewer underscore, and then Facebook. What is my username on Facebook? I don't even know. I need to check.
Wow, is it your personal one, or are you gonna give away?
Yes,
Oh,
my
right,
Facebook.
okay.
Yeah, you can just follow me on Jake Brewer there on Facebook. I need to be more active, I feel, on socials. I kind of have a little bit of a TikTok thing going on, but I don't want to count that quite yet. I have an X page, but I'm not active on it whatsoever. But I think, for me, if I want to get my name out there, I definitely need to be more active on some of those other social media platforms,
Right.
100%.
Well, I used to be on TikTok, but I didn't see the point of it, so I just kind of like, yeah, not interested. In that,
Yeah.
I think I can get as many people watching this on the platforms, the existing platforms like Facebook, Instagram, even on X. Even though
Hmm.
I just really retweet on X and tweet to a certain reporter or anchor of a local news station here, telling him of all the mistakes he makes or his colleagues makes on live TV. I find that very fun. And maybe I might have to do that with you, maybe on the Memphis Wrestling, or maybe on other things
Yeah,
you do.
yeah. Yeah, absolutely. I'm
Become your worst
absolutely
nightmare, your worst critic.
right. 100%. I'm all for, any sort of collaboration in the future. I can work with, our guys, and we can certainly make something happen for sure.
Yeah, no, absolutely. We can't wait as well for you to come back on here to talk to us about any other events and topics you want to discuss, because we did have a chap many moons ago, 5 years ago, I think it was now, called Jack Taylor, who I'm still in contact with, still a friend of the show. He's a great broadcaster out of from West Virginia. I think he was
Hmm.
actually from, and now he's no, not West Virginia. Sorry, from North Carolina. I don't know.
Okay.
I don't know. I don't know where I got West Virginia from.
Yeah.
Wrong state. But yeah, he's doing great things. He's a Panthers fan, so he had his own podcast with a friend of his for Panthers Talk, which is great. And and I'm sure you probably have a lot of interest for the Memphis sports, as you pointed out earlier on in the chat as well. Do you guys have an ice hockey team, or am I just making that
So
up?
no, we previously had a minor league ice hockey
Right.
team. They were called the Memphis River Kings. But probably 10 or so years ago they folded, they disbanded. We've not
That's a
had hockey
shame.
since, which
Oh,
yes, I do agree it's a shame because I used to love going to those games.
yeah.
Hockey, obviously, it's a very fast-paced sport for very high action. So
Well, not just that,
um,
but I think the people used to just go to see what fights were going to happen. That was the exciting bit of the
oh,
game.
absolutely, absolutely. Growing up in elementary school, we would, take a field trip to a River Kings game, once a year. But I think it was planned to not have any fights or anything for all the, school children. So just not to promote any violence or anything. But me as a kid, I wanted to see the fights, right? I wanted to see the violence and the blood and all that. So. But no, yeah. So the River Kings, no longer in existence, unfortunately.
Yes. Well, hopefully another team will come at some point. Let's bring ice hockey back to Memphis.
I would be 100% down with that. We have a NHL team about 3 hours from here in Nashville, the Nashville Predators,
Perfect.
obviously, and so I'd say that's it's a close enough drive to go to games pretty easily, here and
Well,
there.
and
So
Nashville is I guess, the go-to city of Tennessee anyway, so I can understand
un,
why they are based in
yep.
Nashville.
Unfortunately, a lot of Memphians, are very salty on Nashville. I don't know what
Why?
city relationships are like in the UK, but a lot of Memphians, they just kind of, they look down on. They don't look down on Nashville. I think it's more based out of jealousy of like, hey, Nashville gets all these tourists. Nashville has the NFL team. Nashville has this and that. Why can't Memphis have it? So I think it may realistically be kind of a big brother, little brother situation.
Yeah, but I mean, when you think about Tennessee, the first thing that comes into people's heads is Nashville because of the music scene and whatever else is
Hmm.
maybe there. But I mean, when you say about Memphis, I mean, there's not much. I could be completely wrong, by the way. You can educate me now.
Of
I,
course.
I, I just can't think of anything that's comes to my mind apart from the history of Memphis wrestling, with, of course, Jerry the King Lawler as well back
Hmm.
in the day, and many other great people who came from Memphis. But I mean, with Nashville, Tennessee, there's a lot more there to go and see. In Memphis, it just seems like a town in Tennessee. I'm sure it's not, obviously. But yeah, if people are going to Memphis now or in the future, what would you recommend them to go and see?
Yeah, so we have some very interesting things in Memphis. We have Graceland, which is the former home of Elvis
Oh
Presley.
yes, of course,
That's
yes,
yep,
Graceland,
great.
yeah, that's most
Yep.
important, yeah,
And so Graceland is probably the most, the biggest tourist
yeah,
attraction, in Memphis.
makes sense.
Um, right. And another thing that we have, I mentioned earlier, we have the NBA team, the Memphis Grizzlies. Obviously that's as premier basketball as it gets. It's in the best league in the world in basketball. So, having that team has been, a huge help, tourist wise and revenue wise for the city of Memphis. Then we also have the Bass Pro Shops Pyramid in Memphis, Tennessee, which is very interesting. That pyramid used to be the former home of the Memphis Grizzlies and the Memphis Tigers basketball team,
Yes.
as well as it was a concert venue. But now it's a big Bass Pro Shops,
Oh,
which
right.
is a very interesting situation there. And just other things. We have some of the best barbecue in the world. We have some of the best wings in the world in Memphis, and so it's a very much a food town. And so, outside of that, no, I would have to agree that yes, Memphis is not quite as mainstreamed as Nashville. However, there's just something about Memphis. Fun fact about Memphis that I'm sure you and some of this audience had no clue about. The city of Memphis is the most mentioned city name in music, period. So when you look at all the songs that have ever been written
Yeah.
ever, the city of Memphis is the most mentioned city in music.
Wow. That is saying something there, isn't it? But
Yeah.
but I mean, I can't believe that Graceland. I kind of forgot about Graceland being in Memphis, Tennessee. So my apologies to anybody who was offended who are watching or listening in Memphis, Tennessee. I do apologize. Do you think, though, conspiracy theory now for you? Do you think that Elvis is actually dead? Because of course there's loads of rumors and possible sightings of him living his very much low-key life elsewhere in the world. Of course, there's a waitress back in the day who said, "Yes, I've served him many times. I knew it was him from the moment he walked in the door. He gave me that wink in his eye, and I knew exactly then that it was definitely Elvis Presley."
Yeah, no, I don't think I'm gonna believe that conspiracy theory of Elvis is still alive. I think he is unfortunately deceased, but if he does happen to be alive, I think he's probably almost dead by now. I'm sure he's reaching what he's got to be what in his mid 90s. Do we know what year Elvis was born? I'm not positive, but he passed away in 77 and he was 40 something when he passed. So that was what 50 years ago. So he'd be pretty old by now if he were still alive.
Yeah, yeah, obviously, yeah. But I mean, when those claims came out, obviously after his death,
Hmm.
that he's not dead and he's living elsewhere, it could be true. Apparently, there's some many other artists who have passed away, and there's been conspiracies that they're alive as well and living a low key life because they want to get out the limelight. If you were ever to hopefully get famous and get loads of followers. You're doing a very good job anyway at the moment. Anyway, with your Instagram followers, I think almost 2,000 followers. So congratulations on that.
Thank
But
you.
if you were able to, get to loads of followers and fans from around the world following you. Would that worry you in what you post, or would that just encourage you to post more, or would
Honestly,
you?
I'm not positive, because I'm, not in that situation, and so I'm
Yet.
not really sure how I would react if, that were to ever happen. I guess it's just the only thing I'd say is, just always be careful on what I post. Make sure it's not, what I post isn't, what's the word? I can't even think of what the word is to describe it. Just making sure I'm very tasteful and professional and very middle of the ground. I'm not gonna post anything too controversial one
Mhm.
this way or too controversial the other way. Um, but yeah, no, I mean just would have to cross that bridge when if it ever got here.
Oh, I'm sure it will. I'm sure it will. Well, you've only got 2,000 followers. You got way more followers than I do. So I think I'd be quite scared. I think 1,000 people follow me, let alone 2,000 people. Flipping heck, that'd be a bit daunting for sure. Like, who's seeing this?
Yeah,
But
yeah, it's interesting. And like you see, that you have nearly 2,000 followers, but it's like
yeah,
I feel like we only ever react or interact with a very very small percentage of those followers.
yeah,
So it's
that's
like
true.
at the end of the day, who is looking at my stuff? You know what I mean?
Yeah, yeah, it's very true indeed. But you're growing. I'm growing. Very smaller, obviously. My Instagram though is booming this year. Though. I don't
It
know what
is.
I it's I don't know what I've done to it because it's never boomed this much before. Never had 441 followers before either on Instagram because I was stuck. I mean, I was stuck about maybe 6 to 8 months. Right, I'll literally tell you on 378. I could not
Wow.
get off 378. I would
Yeah.
go up to 380 and then within a
Hmm.
few days it dropped that down to
I
378.
know.
I'm thinking,
I know. It's like who out there is unfollowing you? You
yeah,
know?
but it's like, what on earth is this number's haunting me? And I mean, I
Right.
could never get off it. But yeah, I'm never gonna get any past 378. And then all of a sudden I got to 400. I'm thinking, okay, now I'm on 400. And then probably in a few days I probably go back down again, and it didn't. It just kind of go over and over. So it's crazy to think I got over. So I think I might have changed my tactics on Instagram to somehow increase my reach. I don't know what I've done. I haven't done anything crazy, but I just thought
Right.
I would change my approach in capturing what the algorithm might be doing, and it's obviously working sort of. So it's great to see that. So I hope it carries on that aspect. Before we end this conversation, because at the
Mhm.
start of this I should have asked you off air how long you had, because of course I could chat to you all day. Obviously we're not going to chat all day because I have a time limit on this show anyway. But
Of course.
but I want to know though, to sum up one word of what people would, I guess, describe you.
So that is a very open-ended question. I say probably the best word that I can think of right now, and I guarantee as soon as we get off this meeting, I'm going to think of a better word that I should have said. But I'd say probably just persistence. Always just showing up. No matter what gig you're doing or how little or small or big it is, just treating everything as if it's the most important thing in that very moment. I have several gigs going on. Like tomorrow, I have the Memphis Redbirds game that I'll be emceeing, and then later on here in a few months, we'll be right in the middle of college football season, and
Yeah,
so you
yeah,
know I,
the last.
I have a very very cyclical year when it comes to different events, but just treating every event as if it's the most important thing in that moment,
Yeah,
and not just trying to survive.
yeah.
You want to thrive in each environment that you're in. So I'd say persistence is probably the word to best describe me at this very moment.
Yeah, or the last college game day of with Lee Corso as well in August. So yeah, a farewell. I didn't think he would actually retire. I just thought he'd just keep doing the show until he, I guess, dropped dead.
Right,
That's
right.
what I thought. But end of an era. I think he's almost 90 now, I think, or maybe even be 90 when the
Yeah,
show comes on the air. So it's gonna be very strange not seeing him on the show anymore after this August, and even hearing those famous catchphrases of "not so fast" and the famous headgear as
of
well, which
course.
the fans love to see. But it's been interesting to see if another person on the cast will take over that iconic I guess, segments, or it will just die with Leak also. Who knows? Because there's
Right.
been speculation for years that Pat McAfee may take over because he's like the
Hmm.
perfect person to do so. But who knows? Who knows? But no need to answer that question though, because my other question I want to ask you is, what would sum you up in one word? I guess to fulfill your life.
Some a word oh wow.
Or what fulfills your life?
What fulfills my life? Wow.
We're going deep here to end the show
Yeah.
on.
Yeah. Very, very, very deep. I'd probably
New
just say,
questions, new questions. I mean, I've been trying to make I've come up with
yeah.
different questions for a change, and this is one of the ones, two of the ones that I
I'd
came up
say
with.
the biggest thing that fulfills my life, just, when it comes to having a work-life balance is like to me, I'd never want to, sell my soul to my occupations or my work. And so I want to make sure I have a good home life and a good family life. So I guess to answer your question, maybe the word family or rest or balance. That's the word, balance. I'm going to go balance today. So yeah, just balancing work life and yes, I'm on screen and I'm can be in front of a crowd from for all of these events and I'm talking to you now and just
Yeah,
kind of making sure I'm telling you about me, but also being able to go home and just relax and not have to stress about the next thing and
yeah,
just living in the moment. I would say.
yeah. Living in the moment. Good word to use, I guess. You mentioned about performing in front of crowds and or even without a crowd as well, which is very different, obviously, which we discussed earlier. But I mean, is there any particular goals you're hoping to accomplish before the end of this year? Because of course we're over halfway through the year now, according to Fox 5 New York, who posted on the 1st of July, saying we've only got halfway through the year now already, so we make the most of the rest of the year. So, is there anything in particular you are hoping to get over the line before the end of the year?
Yeah, so it's very interesting, and you're the perfect person to ask this question because my goal, getting into the wrestling business very, very recently, my goal was to, but before the end of the year, taking a bump inside the wrestling ring, and so here
Fantastic.
we are, here in a few months, you turn into Resolute Wrestling, you never know what you might see in the ring, so I'll be able to have that goal kind of met here in the next couple of months, so.
Yeah, yeah. Well, we look forward to seeing whatever happens at Wesley Wrestling, I guess, in Crossville,
Mhm.
Tennessee. But it's going to be interesting to see when you turn up there. I guess what happened, and hopefully you get some interesting interviews for them or for your social media, wherever maybe you do with those. But we look forward to seeing them on social media on your social media,
Of
which you
course.
mentioned on Facebook and Instagram already. Talk to me as well about the differences between the UK and US sports because that was one of the topics you brought up to me. So feel free to now go into
Yeah,
more
so
discussion
what
about
what,
that.
what I'm going to talk about specifically is the professional soccer model in soccer compared to the we'll say college football system or even professional football system here in America.
Hmm.
So obviously you have the relegation promotion system
Yeah,
in what your guys' version of football is in the UK.
yeah,
And so, that's something that, quite honestly, like of a lot of sports fans in America have almost kind of fantasized about because, especially on the college football level, because in college football you have, I'm not sure how familiar that you are with college football, but you have 10 conferences in the football bowl subdivision,
yeah,
and so my proposal would be take all 10 of your conferences in college football, pair them up conference by conference, and you have say the SEC with the Sun Belt Conference, and you take those two conferences, and your best two teams out of the Sun Belt get promoted into the SEC. Your worst SEC teams get relegated into the Sun Belt, and so you kind of have a system in college football to where really everybody has an opportunity to win the main championship.
yeah,
Obviously it's a process, but um Yeah, I mean, I'd say like having a relegation promotion system in America would be phenomenal. I would love it.
Well, it's funny you bring that up because I'm going to go straight back into the I guess the bigger leagues, but
Mhm.
it's interesting because I know the concept. I don't know how true it is, but I know the XCF, is it XCF? Yeah, XFL, not XCF, XFL, and the NFL. And I know they were trying to do something where if the worst NFL team gets relegated into the XFL, and if the best XFL team who wins the trophy gets promoted into the NFL, that's been a concept which could work maybe, but I don't know how that would work again, because I believe in the XFL there's only one true winner who wins
Right.
the trophy. So I don't know how that would. Don't know how the other teams go into the other
Right.
three leagues of the NFL. So that's going to be interesting for sure. If
Hmm.
that happens in the future, there's many people who are quite interested by that proposal. There's many people who are again against it. So I guess we will find that out if and when that happens.
Yeah, 100%. To me, I'd be a huge supporter of a promotion and relegation system. And, I spoke about college football earlier,
You
and,
did,
you had mentioned about, stepping up to the big leagues, talking
yeah.
about the NFL and the XFL. But, I think worldwide, I think that college football in America, it is a much bigger deal than a lot of people even realize because college football, especially in the southeastern region of the United States, like this is our professional football. Like it is a
Mm.
massive deal, and really, I mean that's the case, in most parts of the country. And so, yeah, you just kind of piggyback off of what you said. I don't think America will ever transition into a promotion relegation system. However, I would be a full supporter of it. If it ever happened.
Well, you got Major League Soccer as well, and I know that division is getting huge. I think you got
Hmm.
24 teams. I think at the moment there might be more now, but I know I think they will need a second division. If not, you got one already because there's too many teams now in the first division. Because like in our
Right.
division, it's only 20, but
Hmm.
in their division you got 24, which is
Yeah.
mind blowing. Because like 20 years ago, there's probably about
Hmm.
8 or 12 teams in that league. Now
Right.
there's like 24. It's just mind blowing, and with the likes of course David Beckham buying into Miami, and then you got Messi as well coming on board, which has now boosted the audiences to set out crowds, which you only receive when a Manchester United or Real Madrid came to town. Now you're getting it
Hmm.
on a weekly basis in your own, I guess, cities of your favourite local football team, which is great to see.
Right, absolutely. The MLS is certainly growing rapidly. You've had teams in the last few years pop up, such as like Orlando, St. Louis, cities like those. And so, here we are, you never know where the MLS is going to take itself. I'm
Mm.
personally not super knowledgeable about, kind of professional soccer in itself. But no, it's been very interesting to see, a kind of a different league, grow as much as it has here in America.
Yeah, yeah. Well, hopefully you get more knowledgeable on it, and hopefully you get to go to a game and
Yes,
check out.
absolutely.
Maybe even go and work for him. You never know.
You never know. You never
Yeah,
know what kind of curveballs will be thrown in your life. And
exactly. And
right.
what opportunities may come your way. One final or two final questions for you, actually. One is I will now give you the floor to, I guess, give you the floor to discuss anything you would like to get off your chest, which you think is important to get off your chest, which I might not have brought up in this conversation.
Yeah, so I mean, honestly, the only thing I would have to say to get off my chest is sort of what I'd mentioned in the very beginning of the interview. I know yourself with the Edward Fowler show. You do a phenomenal job, and you're able to contact all these guests and bring them on your show. And I feel if you just continue to work hard in these next few years, I really think that your content in your show could truly blow up, and it can be on that level of the CVVs of the world. It's all about persistence and balance, like I
Oh,
said earlier. So,
of course. But
but
I try best to be persistent. I do
mhm,
try and have at least a guest on once a week. I try my best to do that. I feel like in the months of March to August, I feel like it's like a booming period. I feel like January and February is very difficult. I feel like people just getting over
mhm.
Christmas or whatever. So I don't know what's happened, but that nobody wants to come on. And then when we get like to the end of the year, I feel like November time, that's when I get again starts to slow up, and it's trying to find hard to find people to come on the show. But
Absolutely.
thank you for the kind words. Of course, Jake is referring to the I don't know where you're still there. I wasn't sure. Were you getting a phone call then?
No. So my phone is almost dead, and so
Oh,
I wanted to go through, and so no, I was just messing with it. You're
all
good.
right.
No, I was
Well, I probably might have a disconnection now. I'm hoping your phone didn't die because that's what happened with Jake Hager. His phone died halfway through our
Oh wow.
conversation, so
Yeah.
I hope it didn't happen with us. But I would just say though that Jake was referring to CBV because of course this family has been on this channel back in 2019 as an audio version. However, we never I could not figure out a video how to do a video. I did it on video, but I couldn't figure out how to get him projected on my background, unfortunately. So it was a shame, but it's all there in audio version. It's available right now on all major platforms, so do check it out if you want to listen to that conversation from 2019 with my awful voice compared to how it is today. Got to mention one last thing to you, Jake, and that is I hope that you enjoyed what you saw of the show. I don't know if you just saw clips of the show or if you actually gone to my YouTube channel or not, but how did you do your research?
Yeah, no. So I, sort of just watched a lot of your clips on your Instagram channel. I certainly liked what I saw. I think a lot of it, I'd say your show is very easy to watch because the uh, pers personal conversations, I guess you could say. They're very easy pills to swallow, and the things
Oh,
that you
good.
ask, and I think they're very relatable to most people. And so, yeah, I mean, honestly, I think you're doing tremendous work, obviously, and like I said, just persistence and balance is really all it takes. And I think that you're doing a phenomenal job, and what you're trying to accomplish here with the Edward Fowler show. So,
Yeah. The brand, the
right,
brand, good or bad, I don't know. But that wasn't my final question. That was as a segue. But the final question is though is who would you suggest maybe I should contact to come on the show next? You mentioned you had a few people reach
hmm
out to you about what on earth is this show is about. Hopefully, I've lived up to your expectations of what you saw of the clips. Because of course, you're going to get like a minute or so of clips to determine what someone's like compared to a
of
full-length
course.
video, obviously, or episode on the way to work, in the bathroom, wherever it may be. Yes, people apparently do listen to the show in the bathroom when they're doing whatever they do in the bathroom, apparently. So you never know what they may do. But yeah, you can listen to it anywhere in the world because online or offline.
Of course, yeah. I mean, I'd say the two main guys that I would suggest, bringing on next are the guys that I mentioned earlier. You have Dustin Starr, owner and operator of Memphis Wrestling, and then you also have my brother Travis Brewer. He is a double A professional umpire in the Texas League, and so I feel like those are two guys that are in two totally separate worlds, but they're sport related, and I think people would be able to kind of relate to them as well. So those are my two suggestions.
Well, thank you very much for those suggestions as well, and make sure to smash that subscribe button if you've not already done so, as you can see in the top left corner. As of this video, dated the 3rd of July 2025, we've got over 318 subscribers in the last 24 hours or so. I want to say we did gain 2 new subscribers. I don't know if that was because of your appearance coming on the show, Jake, or it was just a coincidence that they were watching something else on my channel and they liked what they saw and then subscribed. I don't know if it was because of you or the other reels I was posting at the time, but every little helps. Hopefully we can get to 320 subscribers. Of course, the goal is to get to 400 subscribers. People will say when they get 300 and odd subscribers, they say, yeah, my goal is 500, but no, my goal is to get to 400 subscribers. Never have 400 subscribers in my life. So if we can get to 400 subscribers, then that'd be great. Make sure, Jake, as well, to share this video out. Tell all
Of
your
course.
friends, all your followers to subscribe either on youtube.com/Edward Fowler or even on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Amazon Music, or iHeartRadio, or wherever else they may get the podcast, plus by typing The Edward Fowler Show. If you are listening to this on the Edward Fowler Show audio platforms and you are on Apple Podcasts or Spotify and you're listening to this, please do leave a 5-star rating. If you are listening exclusively on Apple Podcasts, then please leave a 5-star review and rating, because all the reviews and all the ratings I receive will help to boost the show up in the rankings to get this in front of more eyeballs for more listeners to check it out. Apparently on Spotify, this show is ranked 150 in the rankings as of this week, according to some email I received. I don't know how genuine it was, but they told me that apparently my show is ranking at 150. Don't know how true that is, but yeah, help me to boost that up and get up to maybe 140 in the rankings or more. So if you're on those platforms, then do help me out with the algorithms to get this show in front of more eyeballs, and as Jake pointed out before, to get onto the CVV levels. But we will see about that. Thank you again, Jake, for joining me today. I hope it was a pleasure for you, as it was for myself, and I hope as well that you will, come back on again, and hopefully we'll spread the word of the show, and hopefully, more eyeballs will come from your direction to check out this channel on both YouTube and on the major podcast platforms out there.
Awesome. Yeah, absolutely. I certainly appreciated all my time here, and I certainly enjoyed everything that we talked about. And, obviously it was a pleasure to meet you and get to know you a little bit too. So, obviously, like you said, guys, like, subscribe, like, do whatever you can, because, the Edward Fowler Show is the real deal, 100%. So,
Well, thank you very much for that. And usually when people come on the show and they say, "Yeah, I'll come back on the show again," that means they don't have to come back on the show again.
yeah, right,
They publicly say it on the show, but then when I was like, "Well, you did say you could come back on the show," and
Mhm.
and I either get no response or whatever. I don't know what's going on. So I don't know if I gave a very bad impression or a bad experience on here by asking difficult questions. Personally, I don't think they are, but to them they think it is. So I don't know. I could be wrong. But it's been a pleasure, as always, to you, Jake, and I hope that my guests can find you, not my guests, my listeners and viewers can find you at Members Wrestling or any of the other great sporting events you are involved in, which I'm sure you'll be posting on your social media as well. So do check out Jake on all social media, share him around, tell your friends about him. An up-and-coming broadcaster and interview extraordinaire as well. Maybe a future WWE commentator or TNA wrestling commentator or even AEW commentator as well, because he does have the knack and the skill. Perhaps he will take Dustin Starr's job on Memphis Wrestling. Let's hope so. Until the next episode, make sure to like, share, comment, and as well subscribe. As I mentioned a few minutes ago, we are over 318 subscribers. And until the next episode, whenever there may be, enjoy the rest of your afternoon or evening.